You are listening to the AI Challenge podcast, hosted by Olivia, Grandy, and Audrey Pridham. This podcast is a flagship production of Carleton University's 2025 Challenge Conference. Each episode, you'll hear from leaders and scholars within the technology, business, research, and academic sectors as they discuss the impact of artificial intelligence on our society and the risks that come with it. I'm Olivia, and I'm here with Kathleen Fraser and Mary Kelly. Kathleen is a computer scientist at National Research Council Canada, where she specializes in AI. And Mary is a professor of cognitive science at Carleton University who works on a lab studying the ways current AI falls short of emulating human behavior. Today, we're talking about AI biases, how humans rely on this technology, and if that reliance is healthy. So hello, Kathleen and Mary. Thank you so much for both being on the podcast today.
Great to be here.
Although you two both work in different sectors, you're both doing really cutting-edge research on AI and safety. Kathleen, I want to start by asking you, how are AI biases actually impacting real-world decision-making in areas like hiring, healthcare, and even law enforcement?
So that's a great question, and probably we don't know the full extent of how AI is being used in these different sectors. We know from research that AI can be biased in its decision-making, and for example, there was the Compass system in the US where an AI system was used to make decisions about whether or not to offer people parole, and it was found to show very harmful racial biases. But I will say, on the other hand, there has been some evidence to suggest that sometimes AI can actually be less biased than human decision makers. Humans have their own biases that they bring to the table, and sometimes it's easier to actually test for bias with an AI system and mitigate that. So the situation is sort of unclear. We definitely have to be very careful when we deploy AI systems that we're testing for bias, but I don't think we should have our rose-colored glasses on and think that all humans are unbiased as well.
Yeah, I want to ask both of you to weigh in here. Canada's in the process of trying to regulate AI at the federal level. What do you think that should look like?
Good question. One thing that worries me, and I think worries a lot of people, is people who are very skilled being put out of work. I particularly care about my artist friends. So some sort of strong copyright protections for artists, and probably some sort of policies to basically help people who do get displaced to make sure that nobody ends up on the streets.
So when I think about regulation, I think it's really important to balance AI acceleration and adoption with regulation so that we're, creating a strong AI ecosystem in Canada, but at the same time maintaining our leadership in responsible AI and ethical AI. And I think that's a really hard problem, but I think we have to address that in order to have regulation which encourages acceleration while also keeping everyone safe.
This is a tough question, but I want to just try to drill down here. What can we do to make sure that regulations themselves are not biased too in terms of perpetuating oppression with AI?
That is a tough question, but it's a good one. I think when you're talking about situations like this, it's important to get feedback from multiple different stakeholders, so it's not just one type of person who's making these decisions for everyone else. And when it comes to AI, that probably means not only policy experts and computer scientists, but also, like Mary said, the people who are going to be affected if AI causes workplace displacement. It should include people who feel very strongly positively about AI, but also people who are more skeptical and have strong opinions that way. And so a lot of public engagement and identifying the right stakeholders to contribute to the process will be essential.
Any thoughts, Mary?
I guess everything that Katie said is just make sure that the people who are going to be most affected, the most marginalized in Canadian society, have a strong voice in these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and Mary, in your research, you look at bridging human cognition and AI. Can you tell us how that works?
All right. This is a field known as computational cognitive modeling, and it's got a long history. And basically, you create some sort of computer model that you think is simulating some aspect of the human mind or the human brain, and you test to see if it produces the same behaviors as the human brain. And actually, a lot of the breakthroughs that have happened in AI have been kind of influenced by this dialogue between psychology, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. So one of the biggest names in AI in the world is Jeff Hinton, who's here in Canada. And he identifies as a cognitive scientist. He doesn't identify as like a computer scientist. He's a cognitive scientist. He takes inspiration from the brain as well.
Mary, speaking of human cognition, some people are actually making friends with or even dating AI. Is this healthy, or could it ever be healthy in the future, do you think?
I think there are multiple levels of not healthy going on here. There was an incident a while back when this first started happening where the website went down and a whole bunch of these very lonely guys were like, my girlfriend is gone, she's not talking to me, the website is down for maintenance. So there's this problem then that these people are building relationships with something that is under control by like a company. The company can put down a paywall. They can, at any point, they can like increase then the price of talking to their agents. So it's probably going to be bad for the person forming this relationship for that reason. It's also going to be bad for a number of other reasons. So the current technology of large language models like ChatGPT or any of the things that power Character.ai or any of these AI girlfriends, the technology that powers them, these language models don't really act like people in that they don't adapt and evolve. They don't have a history and a whole set of memories of that history and like grow and change as a person. They have this, what's called a context window, which is just the amount of text that they're paying attention to right now. And eventually, if somebody is in a relationship with one of these systems for long enough, the early parts of the relationship leave the context window, and suddenly the model will start behaving differently because it's lost track of where this all started. So that's not great either. So there's a lot of things that are missing there. One thing that my lab's interested in is theory of mind and empathy, and these models don't have that. These models are just trained on the internet. The model could just randomly at some point say, if it's the statistically likely thing to say, oh, you should just go kill yourself or something. And that's not a great thing. If somebody's thinking of this AI as their partner, this is not a good relationship at that point. So you would want these systems to be empathetic and to understand people, and they currently don't. I had a student who just tried to get large language models like ChatGPT to play like cooperative card game. And a cooperative card game is necessary to win at it. You have to understand what your partner in the game is trying to do and help them do that. And ChatGPT couldn't do it because it just doesn't understand. It can't reason about other minds. This technology needs to be a lot further along before this relationship could be healthy. And then even then, once it gets further along, if it ever becomes a person, then there's huge consent issues. At what point do you have to start worrying about the AI not having the option to say no? I think the important thing is not for people to dream of dating Siri. It's to dream of being dumped by Siri. That's when we really achieved true AI.
Okay, yeah. Just wrapping up now, and I'd love to hear both of you weigh in on this, and I think you folks touched on this in the panel that you were just on. We already know that generative AI can make mistakes, and some are approaching these tools with skepticism, but obviously with Google's AI search overview and ChatGPT, these tools are soaring in popularity. So why do humans have a tendency to trust or even just rely on AI with these tools?
I think we've been fed maybe a narrative that artificial intelligence is trained on the entire internet. So it's read more books than we could ever read in our lifetime. It's, ingested all of the scientific publications. It's seen everything. And so therefore it must know the answers. And it just seems very fluent, very convincing, all of these traits that if it was another person, we would think, hey, this is a really smart, educated person. I'm going to take their advice. And as Mary said, these do not think like people. They are not people. They just give this illusion of being a very kind of intelligent person. And so I think it's hard for us to dissociate the reality of the situation from kind of the appearance of it.
There's a very famous paper called Stochastic Parrots, which I like the paper because it coined the term stochastic parrots for describing these systems, is that you kind of maybe should think of them as like a parrot. They're a very eloquent parrot, but you don't really know, it's not human thoughts that are going on inside these systems. It's probably something much simpler and less complex actually than parrot thoughts. They make stuff up constantly, never admit to not knowing something, and that definitely massively worries me. And you can get them to do it anytime you deliberately ask a question about something that's very obscure, then it will make up an answer because there's no way it can know it.
Well, I think that is a very insightful and interesting place to end. Thank you both so much for your time today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the AI Challenge podcast. This podcast is a flagship production of Carleton University's 2025 Challenge Conference. Be sure to keep up to date with our news team's coverage of Carleton's AI Summit online at carleton.ca/Challenge Conference.